We have been taking this month after retreat to dive deeper into each of those ways that God has given us. And so, as a reminder, I thought my mic went out for a second. A couple weeks ago, we talked about what it means to learn a new joy, right? We talked about how the source of that joy, ladies, the source of that joy determines a lot about how you experience that joy. Now, last week we talked about learning new peace, just like the silence. We can be peaceful in the silence. No, it's all good. There weren't many of us here last week, but does anyone remember anything we talked about in regards to that new peace? Anything about it? Coffee. What about coffee? You want to hear? Nate, you remind us what we talked about with coffee?
What?
Do you want to remind us what we talked about in regards to coffee?
About the different brewing methods.
Hey, different brewing methods. So we'll talk about that. Nice. He was just coming in clutch. The process that we go through when it comes to attaining and experiencing that new peace actually transforms us as we go through that process. Just like there's many different ways to brew the same coffee bean, but the process it goes through determines your end result, right? Then tonight we're going to talk about new way of thinking in our minds. And so our passage, as we, let's get that for a second. If we want to read this passage together, we can just go through it. So 1, 2, 3. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put it into practice, and the God of peace will be with you.
Philippians 4:4.
Well, thank you. All right, before we go super deep, I just want to stop. And pray before we get any deeper. So if you guys want to close your eyes, put food down, just take a couple seconds to be still, to relax any muscles that you feel tension in. A couple deep breaths. God, we thank you for the new life that you give us. We thank you for your instructions in this chunk of Philippians, with how we can interact with that word, how we can live that out, Lord. Thank you that your promises are true yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Now we can look at scripture written thousands of years ago and trust that it's still true, and experience that it's still true. Would you guide us as we go through, as we consider how you've created us to think, what you've created us to think about? And would you literally change our minds on this tonight? In your name I pray. Amen. So as I prayed and as we've been talking about, we're diving into what it means to have a new way of thinking, right? Which comes straight out of verse 8, which says, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. So that's it. That's all we're talking about tonight. It's only really one verse, right? And if you look at it, it's kind of simple, isn't it? Right? Paul just gives a bunch of adjectives, and then it's like, okay, cool. Those things, think about it. Right? That's all the verse is saying. And the Bible does this thing sometimes, the authors of the Bible do this thing sometimes where You'll read like a verse and it seems like common sense. It'll be like a short verse, it's super simple, directly to the point, and it'll be like, well, duh, like why wouldn't I do that, right? When we come across those verses, I think it's really important to ask the why questions. The first one is being honest with yourself and being like, why is the author telling us to do that? Like, why is thinking about these things a good thing? But the other why that I think it's important to ask is, why do you think the original author wanted to remind the original audience of said commonsensical thing, right? Why is this in the Bible according to the original audience? I'm not going to do a deep dive into like the church in Philippi right now, but I think that if we look at kind of our own lives, we're going to get really close to why the original audience would have needed to hear this. And so I started on this before, but now I want you guys to deeper dive into this. Take a few minutes at your tables and talk through these. So, what specific influences in your life give you things to think about? So this could be people in your lives, this could be media, this could be anything. What are the sources of the things that you think about, right? Second, what do you think about most often and how do you feel about that? So I know we gotta be like in school and you gotta think about that a lot, but also think about this question in terms of like, if you're chilling on the couch and you're not watching anything, or if you are and you're not really watching it, you just have it on, I'm good to do that. Like, what does your mind go to when your mind doesn't have to work? So, what does your mind go to when your mind doesn't have to work? What do you think about most often? How do you feel about that? Just emotional reaction to it. Then finally, do you feel like you have some level of control and mastery over your thought life? Do you feel like when you're watching, when you're listening, you have a level of consciousness about what you're thinking of? Again, no right or wrong answers, just like, where are you guys in that? What comes to mind? So I'll give you guys a few minutes and talk about it at your tables. All right, let's bring it back. So let's quickly talk about the first one. So what specific influence in your life give you things to think about? So what are the people or things like input that give you things to think about? Yeah. Your family. Yeah, your family is an input. Yeah.
Like, oh wait, never mind.
That's okay.
I'm looking at the next one.
You're good, we're almost there. Any other sources? You're not with your family all the time. Who else are you around?
Friends.
Friends, so friends can be input. What other inputs do you have?
What's happening?
Huh? Oh, nice. That took me a second. What other inputs? What other like specific inputs in your life? The Bible. Nice. Church. Okay. Social media. Yeah. The internet. Yes. Are any of you guys? Maybe it's just leaders. Podcast listeners, though. Audiobooks. Yeah, like that. Those are inputs. Lyrics of songs. Yes. Music. What else? Any other inputs?
If I decide to read one,
Yes, like an actual book, right? A paper, that thing with printed words on it. What about the second one? What do you think about most often and how do you feel about that? Yeah, Mary.
what like project I'm gonna do with my garage next?
What project? So how are you going to spend your free time and be creative with, right? What else? What else do you guys find yourselves thinking about the most? Yeah?
I don't want to sound depressing, but like what other people think of me.
Yeah, that's a huge one. I'm going to talk about it in a second. What other people think about you, right? What else?
Just like what I should be doing, like what else could be productive.
Yes, what other productive thing could or should I be doing? Which, yes. Huh? What time are you going to bed? Amen. I'm already on that. What about the last one? What do you guys like think? Do you guys feel like you have some level of control? Or maybe a better way to phrase that is, how much control do you feel like you have over the thoughts that go in your brain? None. Straight up none?
I probably should.
Not as much as you probably should?
One
Wow, Daniel's got this. He can just walk out. He doesn't close
We
it.
ruled that out, actually.
Oh. I felt like maybe you guys had a couple case studies that proved it during discussion.
That's okay, we love you.
No, I think those are some honest answers, right? And I think they all, the realities that come to mind when you guys talk about that, you guys can talk about that more in small group as well, friends. I think those questions beg us to ask another question, which is, oh yes. Oh, which is, why does our thought life matter God? Yes, ma'am.
Because God, like, knows our thoughts, so it's basically us talking.
God knows our thoughts. Okay, that's a good way to think about it. So God knows what we're thinking, so we can't hide anything from Him, right? Maybe prayer is the direct way to talk to Him, right? But why is our thinking? Why is Paul using letter space and money and time to remind the Philippians that they need to think about these things, right? I think what we just talked about, and the questions that come out of that, is that we understand that our thoughts have a deep impact on how we live in this world. Our thoughts might begin up here in our brains and in our hearts, but they work themselves out into our world, right? They work themselves into how we interact with God. They work themselves into how we interact with other people, right? They work ourselves into how we operate in this world. And I was thinking about this actually last week. If you guys want a prime example of the ways that our thinking changes the way that we live, just think about basically the entire marketing market, the entire marketing industry, specifically Super Bowl commercials, right? Why do you guys think companies spend millions of dollars on advertising? Why is that something that they think is worth investing?
They want to see their faces on pages.
Okay, that's part of it. Yep. Yeah. Mary, are you gonna redeem that? Keep going. Okay. I mean, I think this is intuitive. Oh,
Especially with the Super Bowl, you're reaching a broader audience.
Yes.
So a lot of eyes are on a certain thing, and you just capturing their attention already puts you in their mind as an idea that will manifest.
yes. You guys, think about how many social media platforms, how many advertisements realize this truth, that what you think impacts your real life. So when you see a commercial, when you see an ad, it affects how you talk about that product to other people, right? It affects how you end up spending your money most directly. It affects how what you end up searching online, right? And it affects what you even think about, right? If I see, y'all know the guitar, guys, low-key, I want to drop $1,800 on a Telecaster, and I probably shouldn't at the moment, but I think about it all the time. And the more that I Google it and look on Reverb and Amazon and other music stores, the more that my search engines suggest, hey, here's a bunch of places to spend money on guitars, right? So my thinking, my dwelling on guitars is manifesting itself into what I see online and eventually how to spend my money and what Bonnie gets mad at me for, and all of these things. So your thought life might start up here, but it affects so much of what we live out. Now guitars are kind of a silly example, right? Products are even kind of a silly example. But what Lydia brought up was really crucial too. Think about how much time in every social interaction, every social circle you go into, how much time and effort you subconsciously or consciously think about what other people think about you. And then think about how your thoughts of what other people think about you impact how you interact in those circles. Sometimes they literally change how you choose to interact with somebody else, right? Your thoughts really change how you live. And not just like what other people think about you, but what do you think about you? Right? Like if I walk into a room and I'm like, I don't know, the best basketball player on the court, say the room is a court, right? I'm gonna come in with confidence, with swagger, I'm gonna come in ready to dominate, right? And Brandon might destroy me. But if I know that Brandon's better than me, and I'm intimidated by that, I'm gonna walk into that gym a little bit differently, right? So how do you even interact with those circumstances is different, how do you think of yourself? And so here's what I want us to think about. Those are just like simple examples, but I think there's some deeper spiritual truths here. Because your thought life is so influential, so powerful in your life. I think Paul's challenging us in our verse to consider what we're plugging in and what we're dwelling on. Right? I think Paul is reminding the church of Philippi to think about all these categories, not because it's not common sense, but because he understands the depth and the impact of our thought life on the rest of our lives, right? And so, think about our thought life like soil, right? The Bible uses agricultural analogies all the time, and so this isn't too far of a stretch. What else grows in soil?
Coffee beans.
Coffee beans. Does anyone, especially me, do you know what type of soil is perfect for growing coffee beans?
Perfect soil.
Amen. That was 100% mastery of your thoughts.
Type of.
Type of. Maybe that's a blood type. That's concerning, Nancy. What type of soil? Do you guys know what type of soil is perfect for most coffee beans?
I never knew there was different types of soil.
Well, yeah, dude, we're about to blow your mind. And we're going to have a series on agriculture, and it's going to be great. All right. No, coffee beans prefer a slightly acidic soil of approximately 6.5 pH is what I read. And they prefer soil that drains really well. So apparently they don't like being soggy and just chilling there. They prefer very particular types of soil. And you can find this particular type of soil like at not super high like Everest, but pretty high altitudes in like tropical zones. So you'll see a lot of like coffee farms in those places, and they're there because they realize, hey, we can make really good coffee beans grow here because of the quality of the soil. Now, what do you think happens if you put a coffee plant in not great soil? Yeah. It'll taste different. If it grows, it'll taste different. Lydia, what'd you say? It dies. Yeah. Yeah. If you put any plant in the wrong type of soil for long enough, depending on how bad the soil is, it'll die. Right? I think that just like coffee plants need to be grounded in specific types of soil, I think Paul's encouraging us to consider what type of soil we're putting our minds into, right? That actually, if we want to grow in this new life that God has given us, we need to be really considerate of the type of soil that we're thinking about, the type of soil that we're planting ourselves in. Because you guys know full well how much those inputs can give us when we're not even looking to receive, right? When you guys are on social media, when you're watching, think about how much, I'm super guilty of this, how much we kind of just like mindlessly consume sometimes. We kind of just watch, we kind of just listen. We're not always processing what we're watching and listening to. No matter if you're processing or not, that is your soil. That is your thought soil. Whatever you're putting in, whatever you're surrounding yourself with, whether that be on the internet, whether that be what friends are talking about, whether it be scripture, whatever you're surrounding yourself with in your thought life, that's your soil. And that can be good soil, and that can be bad soil, right? If we take a look at our verse, Paul gives us descriptive words of what the soil looks like. Whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. So you guys can talk about this more in small group, but I would love for you guys, in addition to what's on the small group guide, to maybe like take a look at some of these words in particular, and just talk about like, what do those words actually mean, right? We can read them and they're kind of simple words, but I think if you unpack them in terms of like, what does something that is pure look like in our world today? What does something that is admirable look like in our world today? And like give specific examples, right? As you guys do that, you're gonna get a picture of the type of soil that is needed to grow Miss Sam. Thank you. I also want to point out that just like plants, when they grow, do you guys know the first thing that plants grow when you plant seeds? The stems, the roots, right? If you put plants in the right soil, most plants, I'm not a gardener by any means, most plants, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to grow down into that soil and grow a foundation, right? Most of that foundation is under the surface. So I think that a lot of the time when we talk about not just like learning a new way of thinking, but learning this whole new way of life, a lot of our foundation, a lot of that initial growth is going to happen like in us, inside of us. That'll then come out in the ways that we treat other people, in the ways that we make decisions in the world. Wow, middle table's distracted tonight. I just gotta call that out for a second. I did want to give one caveat to this, because it can be really tempting as we define what this good soil is, it can be really tempting to assume that what Paul is saying then, and what other parts of Scripture say, are that we should only form ourselves kind of like a bubble of this good soil and never touch any bad soil whatsoever ever again. Right? It can be really tempting to be like, okay, this is what Paul says, therefore I'm going to cut out everything else in my life that doesn't fit in these categories. I actually don't think that that's what the Bible is asking us to do, primarily because of how many times Scripture also commands us to go out into the world and be a light, be an ambassador, be part of the difference-making process, right? We talked about, when we talked about new joy, we talked about how God has put us all on this planet to be part of his redemption plan for the world. And so if we only kind of create ourselves, put ourselves into a bubble of just these things, we're gonna miss being the light. We're gonna miss actually helping this world find redemption. And so that's just the caveat. Like, yes, we need to be able to put these things in our lives. We should think on them. We should dwell on them. We need to be, as we just talked about, really considerate about what we're dwelling on and how that impacts the rest of our lives. But that is not an excuse and not a reason to go form, as we call in church world, some holy huddle in a corner and pretend like the rest of the world doesn't exist. Because actually church has tried that, not our church. Church history, there's been times where people have tried that and they miss like the rest of the Bible. So let's not do that, friends. So practically, I'm not saying that like we should cut out every piece of secular music or movie or not like form any relationships with people who aren't Christian. Like that is not what I'm getting at all. What I am getting at is that these things should be the foundation of our soil, the majority of our soil, so that when we interact with those other things that maybe aren't good soil, we have a foundation to filter those things through and then output a godly response. So you guys know another coffee analogy, like a coffee filter. What does a coffee filter do? Filters, yes, Mary. Yes. So, shocking, deep answer, right? A coffee filter allows the coffee to go through the grind, right, and end up in your cup, but it keeps the wet grinds on top, right? You don't want those grinding in your cup. It's not fun. I think that's a picture too of what kind of like a practical application of this soil is, right? This should be our foundation. This should be our filter. But that also means that we should be able to look at what isn't good soil in our world and interact with it in a godly way. Not to reject it, not to run away from it, but to be able to process it and filter through it. You guys actually might find more godly things out there in secular things than you might expect, because God is all over the place. So, I want to give us plenty of time in small groups, but I want us to take this away and think about it. Because our thought lives shape how we live, we need to ground our thought life in good soil if we want to grow in our new life, right? So because our thoughts are so powerful, they're so influential, we need to be careful of what we're putting in and getting back out if we want to be able to grow in this new life that God has given us. We need to learn how to rethink everything, right? Paul gives us some description there. Paul also talks about our minds and other parts of his letters that you guys are going to talk about in small groups. So know that this is just one example of what Paul talks about when he's teaching us how to think differently and think this new way of thinking. So I'm just going to pray, and then you guys should have plenty of time in small groups. So, God, I thank you that you give us your word to rely on. And thank you that you give us the tools through your Spirit to be able to actually live this stuff out. Lord, we just give you permission to shape our thoughts, our minds, shape our hearts around this stuff, Lord. I just ask that you would bless this time of small groups, that you would encourage us in deep conversation, Lord, in vulnerable conversation. And we just love you. In your name we pray. All right, so it is 47 right now. You guys can have until about 8:20 for small groups. You guys have plenty of time. Go through those guides, just hang out. But then we do need to reconvene at 8:20 here. So if you guys want to spread out in the back rooms, you guys can do that. But we've got plenty of time. Sound good? Cool.